You are starving in a room full of food. You check your phone 100 times a day. You buy things you don't need. You chase relationships. But the void inside you never fills up.
No, it never does.
Today, we are diagnosing you with a 2,500-year-old psychological virus, the hungry ghost. Welcome to the debate.
Yes, welcome. And we are looking today at a really fascinating concept drawn from Eastern mythologies, specifically within Buddhism and Hinduism. It's known as the preta.
Right, the preta. And the visual depictions of these creatures are, well, they're incredibly striking and, frankly, deeply unsettling.
Oh, absolutely. They are supernatural beings defined entirely by their suffering, specifically this agonizing, unquenchable hunger and thirst.
Yeah, they're drawn with these massive bloated stomachs, right? Representing this infinite capacity for desire, but they have these tiny mouths and necks as thin as needles.
Necks as thin as needles, exactly. So the tragic mechanics of their anatomy mean that no matter how much they consume, it is physically impossible for them to ever satisfy that agonizing hunger.
They are just trapped in a state of perpetual deficit.
Right. And it's a brilliant metaphor because it just perfectly maps onto human neurobiology. The reason we are discussing this ancient myth today is because modern psychology and sociology really have resurrected it.
Yes, specifically Dr. Gabor Mate. He adapted this myth into what he calls the hungry ghost syndrome, and he uses it to frame the modern realm of addiction.
And we aren't just talking about, chemical dependency here.
Right, not just drugs. We are talking about the chronic state of dissatisfaction in our contemporary, hyper-connected societies. I mean, it is an addiction to consumerism, to social media validation, status, and ultimately to dopamine itself.
Exactly. So the central question we are exploring today is whether modern technology has intentionally turned us into addicted, spiritually bankrupt, hungry ghosts.
Which is my position, absolutely.
Right. Or if this constant dissatisfaction is actually the very evolutionary engine that drives human progress, which is where I stand.
Yeah, I am taking the position that this is a manufactured spiritual sickness. I mean, modern capitalism and the architecture of the digital world, they are explicitly designed to keep us perpetually empty.
And I come at it from a very different way. I will argue that what is being pathologized here as a virus or some insatiable hunger is actually the ultimate evolutionary advantage in a highly competitive global economy.
An advantage?
Yes. Without this profound dissatisfaction, human progress simply ceases to exist.
Okay, I see why you might frame it as a natural drive, but let me give you a different perspective on the sheer intentionality behind our current environment. Modern capitalist society hasn't just tapped into a natural drive, it has weaponized our psychology.
Weaponized is a strong word.
But it fits. When we look at the source material analyzing Dr. Mate's framework, we see that algorithms, the infinite scroll, targeted ads, these are not neutral tools.
Sure.
They are explicitly designed to maintain a state of human dissatisfaction. They constantly feed the consumer the illusion that the next purchase, the next promotion, or, the next viral post is going to be the thing that finally brings fulfillment. But it is a structural lie.
A structural lie? Or, simply the reality of how motivation operates on a neurological level?
A lie. Because the delivery mechanism is fundamentally flawed by design. Think about the anatomy of the preta we just talked about.
The needle-thin neck.
Exactly. The needle-thin neck of the hungry ghost is perfectly analogous to the limited bandwidth of a dopamine hit. Dopamine, as a neurotransmitter, is largely about the anticipation of reward, not the actual enjoyment of it.
Right, that's well established.
So when you get that hit from a social media like or buying something online, it registers intensely in the brain for a fleeting second. It squeezes through that needle-thin neck, but it provides absolutely zero long-term emotional or spiritual sustenance.
I see where you're going with this.
The mechanism guarantees that the stomach remains bloated and empty. We are structurally blocked from taking in true nourishment, which ensures we just keep swiping, keep buying, and keep playing the game. I mean, it is a manufactured sickness.
Okay, that's a compelling argument, but have you considered that you are looking at the exact same biological mechanism and completely misinterpreting its purpose?
How so?
You are looking at this needle-thin neck and this bloated stomach and calling it a sickness. I am looking at it and seeing the fundamental driver of human survival.
Oh, come on.
Oh, really? You ask why we are always hungry. I ask, what happens to the creature that is perfectly full?
It gets to actually enjoy its existence?
No, it gets eaten by a predator, or it starves when winter comes. I mean, let's look at the concept of reward prediction error in neuroscience.
Okay.
When an organism anticipates a reward, dopamine spikes, driving the organism to act. But the moment the reward is obtained, dopamine levels drop right back down to baseline, or they even dip slightly below it.
Right.
That drop, that is the hollowness you are describing. If humans were completely satiated, perfectly content, and, never craved another promotion, another innovation, another resource, wouldn't our global economy collapse? Wouldn't our evolutionary progress stagnate entirely?
Wait, let me stop you right there. I understand the biological necessity of hunger for survival, of course, but I struggle to see how you get from a hunter-gatherer seeking food to a teenager doom-scrolling at 2 a.m.
It's the same mechanism.
But aren't you conflating an intrinsic survival drive with a manufactured compulsion?
I don't think I am. The drive is substrate independent. It doesn't matter if the environment is a savanna or a digital ecosystem. Let's drill down into how this actually works.
Go ahead.
When a human experiences a deficit, whether that is a lack of calories or a perceived drop in social status because they didn't get enough likes on a post, the amygdala triggers a stress response. This stress is biologically uncomfortable.
Yes.
It is literally designed to feel bad. It is the agonizing hunger of the predator. To turn off that alarm bell, the prefrontal cortex engineers a solution. We build a stronger shelter, we invent a new tool, or yes, we post a better photo.
So you're saying it's just adaptation?
Exactly. What you are calling a spiritual sickness is actually just our biological thermostat ensuring we don't freeze to death or get ostracized from the tribe.
But that biological thermostat has been hijacked. I'm not denying that the mechanism exists. I am saying the scale and the application of it have been completely perverted.
Hijacked how? Exactly.
You are acting as if the digital environment is just a neutral landscape we are organically adapting to. It isn't. It is an environment engineered by thousands of the smartest people on Earth specifically to trigger that exact amygdala stress response you just mentioned.
Okay, but
Over and over on a loop that never ends.
provide the mechanism then. How is it fundamentally different?
It's the mechanism of receptor downregulation. When you flood the brain with cheap, frictionless dopamine, which is what modern technology does constantly, the brain attempts to maintain homeostasis by pruning its dopamine receptors.
Right, building a tolerance.
Exactly. It literally shuts down the receptors because the input is too loud. That is why the predator's stomach gets bloated, while the neck stays thin. You literally need more and more extreme input just to feel baseline normal.
Well, that's addiction in a clinical sense.
And the system is structurally designed by tech companies to create that tolerance. They use variable ratio reinforcement schedules, the exact same psychology used in casino slot machines. They ensure that you never quite know when the next reward is coming.
I see the parallel you're drawing.
This isn't a natural evolutionary thermostat working properly. This is a thermostat that has been put inside an oven so the alarm never stops ringing.
Look, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that algorithms are some uniquely evil force that fundamentally changed human nature. Algorithms did not invent human ambition, and they certainly didn't invent human dissatisfaction.
They didn't invent it, but they exploit it.
They merely scaled it. They observed what we already wanted, social connection, status, security, novel information, and gave us a more efficient way to pursue it.
They gave us a more efficient way to pursue the illusion of it. Just look at the hustle culture mentioned in the source material.
Hustle culture is just modern ambition.
Hustle culture isn't about meaningful creation, though. It's an unwinnable loop. It promises that if you just grind a little harder, optimize your morning routine a little more, buy this new productivity app, you will finally reach the summit of contentment.
And you think that's a lie?
The summit doesn't exist. The environment is deliberately structured so that the goalpost constantly moves.
Okay, let's use an analogy here to clarify what the algorithm is actually doing. Think about the modern food industry.
Okay.
Food scientists engineer what we call hyperpalatable foods, like potato chips. They find the exact ratio of salt, fat, and carbohydrates to hit our brain's reward centers so perfectly that it completely bypasses our natural fullness cues.
Right, you can eat an entire bag and still feel hungry.
Exactly. That is exactly what algorithms are doing with social information and consumerism. They are hyper-palatable digital inputs. But the crucial point is this. The food scientists didn't invent the human desire for calories. The tech companies didn't invent the human desire for status. They simply provided a hyper-concentrated version of what we biologically require.
That proves my point exactly. If you eat nothing but hyper-palatable junk food, what happens?
Well,
You develop diabetes and heart disease. You become physically sick. If you consume nothing but hyper-palatable digital inputs and endless consumer goods, you develop the hungry ghost syndrome. You become spiritually and psychologically sick.
I think you're stretching the analogy.
No, it perfectly aligns. It takes a natural human desire for security and purpose, and it reroutes it into a closed consumerist loop where actual fulfillment is structurally impossible.
But why must fulfillment be the goal?
What?
This is where I think the spiritual sickness framework fundamentally misunderstands the human condition. You are arguing that because hustle culture and infinite scrolls don't provide lasting peace, they are broken. I am arguing they are functioning exactly as intended.
Functioning to what end?
Survival. The hungry ghost is not a tragic victim of marketing. The hungry ghost is the ultimate survivor adapting to a highly competitive, fast-paced modern environment.
The ultimate survivor? By being chronically dissatisfied, anxious, and mentally exhausted?
Yes, because in a global economy, the moment you are satisfied, you are outcompeted. Contentment is a biological vulnerability.
That is bleak.
It's reality. The algorithms didn't create the competition. The competition has always been there. The infinite scroll is just a mirror reflecting our infinite need to monitor our social standing, gather information, and secure resources.
It is an unwinnable loop.
I say life itself is an unwinnable loop. The drive to keep playing is what keeps us alive. We have essentially turned the algorithm into an evolutionary exoskeleton. We outsourced our tribal status monitoring to a machine so we can adapt faster.
It's an interesting point, though I would frame it very differently. I think you are stripping away the phenomenological reality of what it actually feels like to live in this state.
How so?
You are looking at the spreadsheets of human progress, but completely ignoring the lived experience of the individual. Let's really lean into Dr. Mate's framework here. He explicitly describes this as the realm of addiction. We aren't talking about productive ambition, we are talking about pathology.
I disagree with the label of pathology.
But the core of this disagreement really comes down to the difference between the pursuit of dopamine and the pursuit of real fulfillment.
And this is where we violently disagree.
Well, let me establish the mechanism first. Chasing status and engaging in dopamine-driven behaviors through consumerism, it leaves the individual deeply hollowed out because it compromises their agency.
Their agency?
Yes. When you are addicted, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and impulse control, is physically overridden by the midbrain's craving for immediate relief. You aren't choosing to invent a new technology or build a better life. You are compelled to execute a behavior just to temporarily relieve the pain of the craving.
The drive to relieve pain is essentially what ambition is.
But the Praetus hunger is agonizing. That's the word used in the mythology, agonizing. If modern society has engineered a system where our daily default state is agonizing craving, a state of literal addiction, then we have actively traded our psychological well-being for consumer engagement metrics.
That's quite elite.
That is not human greatness. That is mass pathology.
Okay, you are setting up a false dichotomy between dopamine addiction and real fulfillment, as if one is a disease and the other is the natural, healthy state of a human being. Let me challenge this idea of real fulfillment.
Go on.
Real fulfillment is an evolutionary dead end.
I am genuinely lost as to how you can view human flourishing as a dead end. How is fulfillment a dead end?
Let's look at the biology of it. If an organism achieves a state of perpetual psychological equilibrium, true spiritual and emotional nourishment where it no longer craves anything, that organism stops adapting.
It achieves peace.
Peace doesn't build cities. Think about the last time you achieved a major goal, maybe getting a degree, landing a massive promotion, or buying a house. How long did the profound satisfaction actually last?
I see what you're getting at.
2 weeks, a month, and then what happened? You started looking at the next goal. You started comparing your house to the bigger one down the street.
Right, but
That immediate return to emptiness isn't a disease, it's the exact software update that kept your ancestors alive. The agonizing hunger that prevents the preda from being full, the very hollowness you are decrying, is exactly what forces humans to push boundaries.
at what cost?
We are not designed to be happy. We are designed to survive and reproduce. The pain of the void is the signal that you need to do more.
But that is a deeply cynical view of human capacity. Are we really just biological machines meant to suffer endlessly for the sake of GDP growth and technological escalation?
I think suffer is the wrong word, but yes, we are driven by deficit.
Dr. Made points out that our mouths are too small to take in true spiritual or emotional nourishment from these modern inputs. That implies that true nourishment does exist and that we are capable of it, but our current environment starves us of it by feeding us junk food.
Junk food keeps you alive if you're starving.
We are gorging on targeted ads and viral posts, which leaves absolutely no room for the things that actually sustain the human spirit: deep connection, meaning, stillness.
Listen, spiritual sickness is a luxury. Fulfillment is the luxury of a species that has already conquered its environment. The hunger you pathologize is the exact tool that allowed us to conquer it in the first place.
That doesn't mean we need to keep using it in the same destructive way.
You speak of stillness and deep connection as if they are the default state we have somehow been robbed of. Historically, the default state of humanity was starvation, disease, and brutal competition. The only reason we even have the luxury to sit in this studio and debate the spiritual bankruptcy of social media is because generations of hungry ghosts before us were dissatisfied enough to build modern civilization.
I acknowledge that dissatisfaction plays a role in innovation. Of course it does. But your argument completely fails to account for the scale and the nature of the modern trap.
Scale changes the outcome, not the mechanism.
The mythology of the Preta wasn't invented yesterday. The ancients recognized 2,500 years ago that this state of unquenchable desire was a form of hell. It is a realm of supernatural suffering. What has changed is that we have industrialized the creation of Pretas.
Industrialized.
Yes, we have built trillion-dollar tech infrastructures whose sole fiduciary responsibility is to ensure that you never ever feel like you have enough. The algorithm doesn't care if you build a bridge or cure a disease. It only cares if you stay on the app for another 5 seconds. It is a complete hijacking of the evolutionary mechanism you are praising.
It is an optimization of it.
Optimization for what? Not for the human, for the platform. The human is left with the bloated stomach and the needle-thin neck.
But the byproduct of that optimization is the most technologically advanced, economically robust society in human history.
I'm not denying the tech is advanced.
The hijacking you describe, this constant pushing of targeted ads and hustle culture, forces economic participation. It forces people to get up, go to work, innovate, provide services, and participate in the grand machinery of human progress.
It forces burnout.
Is the individual experience sometimes agonizing? Yes. The mythology gets that part right. But the macro result of millions of hungry ghosts striving for a fulfillment they can never reach is the engine of our collective survival. You want to cure the individual at the cost of the species' momentum?
And you are willing to sacrifice the psychological sanity of the entire species on the altar of perpetual momentum. Where does it end? If the mouth remains the size of a needle and the stomach keeps expanding, eventually the creature collapses under its own weight.
Or it adapts again.
The state of addiction Dr. Mate describes is inherently unstable. You cannot build a sustainable society on a foundation of agonizing, unmet craving. The pursuit of dopamine stripped of actual meaning eventually leads to burnout, alienation, and social fracturing. We are seeing it today.
I think attributing all social fracturing to this is a bit broad.
The hyperconnectivity you say makes us ultimate survivors is actually isolating us. It's leaving us craving the very social cohesion we evolved to need. We are outsourcing our connection to a machine that just feeds on our loneliness.
That assumes the system won't self-correct or evolve further. The hungry ghost is adaptable. If the current inputs, social media, consumerism, eventually threaten survival through the burnout you describe, the nature of the hunger will shift toward a new frontier.
Shift to what?
The amygdala will signal a new kind of stress, and the prefrontal cortex will invent a new solution. But the hunger itself must remain. It is the indispensable engine. You see a tragic cycle of addiction. I see the painful, necessary mechanics of a species that is terrified of standing still.
Well, so we arrive at a fascinating, if somewhat terrifying, crossroads in our understanding. We have looked deeply into the Eastern myth of the Preta and its modern psychological translation into the hungry ghost syndrome.
And honestly, despite our stark disagreements on the value of this state, I think it's clear we completely agree on the diagnosis itself. Modern humans are existing in the perpetual state of the hungry ghost. We are characterized by an insatiable drive for more, navigating a world of infinite scrolls and targeted ads with massive, empty stomachs and needle-thin necks.
Exactly. The profound disagreement lies entirely in whether this is a fatal flaw to be cured or a vital mechanism to be harnessed. I maintain that the modern architecture of consumerism and hyperconnectivity has trapped humanity in a tragic, spiritually bankrupt cycle. It is a manufactured addiction that feeds us the illusion of nourishment while guaranteeing our perpetual emptiness. It is a sickness that hollows out the individual.
Right. And I maintain that this perpetual craving, this precise, agonizing hollowness, is the indispensable engine of economic growth and technological survival. What you call a sickness is the exact evolutionary advantage that prevents stagnation. Without the hungry ghost, the fire goes out.
It demands that we look critically at the invisible forces shaping our daily behaviors and the very mechanics of our own desires.
There is certainly much more to explore in Dr. Mate's work and the broader psychological implications of this architecture.
There is, and so we leave you, the listener, with this. Look at your life today, look at your phone, look at your desires, and ask yourself, are you truly feeding your soul, or are you just feeding the algorithm?